I want to talk to you tonight about 72 hours. Not 72 hours as a countdown to something dramatic. 72 hours as a rule. A quiet, almost boring rule that decides, more than talent does, more than luck does, more than the family you were born into does, whether you end up a millionaire or whether you end up a dreamer. And I want to be precise about that word dreamer, because I don't mean it as an insult. Some of the most talented, most intelligent, most well-meaning people I have ever met in my life are dreamers. They have the idea. They have the vision. They can talk about it for an hour and make you believe it too. What they don't have is the thing I'm about to describe to you. And once you understand what it is, you will start seeing it everywhere, in your own life, in the lives of people around you, in the gap between where you are and where you keep telling yourself you're going to be. Here's the rule. When an idea shows up in your head, a real one, the kind that makes your chest tighten a little because you know it matters, you have 72 hours to act on it. Not finish it. Not master it. Act on it. Take one real, physical, undeniable step in its direction. 72 hours. After that window closes, something happens in the human mind that I have watched happen to thousands of people over 40 years of studying success and failure side by side. The idea doesn't disappear. It gets worse than that. It gets comfortable. It moves from the part of your brain that says, I'm going to do this, into the part of your brain that says, I've always wanted to do that. And once an idea makes that move, ladies and gentlemen, it is functionally dead. It'll sit there for the rest of your life, taken out at dinner parties, polished up, talked about with a little wistful smile, and it will never, ever become real. That's the rule. That's the whole thing. Some of you are looking at me like, that's it? 72 hours? Yeah, that's it. And the reason it's worth an entire evening of your time is that almost nobody actually knows this rule exists, and fewer still respect it once they've heard it. Let me put some numbers on this so you can see exactly what we are talking about. The average working adult, by every study I've ever come across, has somewhere between 2 and 4 ideas a month that they themselves would call significant. A business idea, a skill they should finally learn, a relationship they should repair, a habit they should kill, a book they should write. Call it 3 a month, to be conservative. That's 36 ideas a year. Over a 10-year stretch of adult life, that's 360 ideas. 360 times, in 1 decade, your own mind hands you something worth building a life around. Now here is the part that should stop you cold. Research on intention and follow through, and I've watched this play out anecdotally in every audience I've ever stood in front of, suggests that somewhere around 90% of those ideas never get a single physical action taken on them within the first 3 days. 90%. That means out of 360 legitimate opportunities handed to you over 10 years, roughly 324 of them die quietly in the comfortable idea graveyard, and only about 36 ever get so much as a first step. Now stretch that out further. If even half of those 36 get followed through to any kind of completion, you're talking about 18 real, finished things over a decade, a business, a certification, a manuscript, a transformed body, a repaired marriage, built by a person who did nothing different from you except respect a 72-hour window 3 dozen times. That's the entire distance between the person who always wanted to and the person who did. It's not a bigger brain. It's not a trust fund. It's 36 windows, respected instead of let go. Now, why 72 hours specifically? Why not a week? Why not someday, when things calm down? Because of how the mind protects itself from the discomfort of a new commitment. The first 24 hours, an idea still has heat on it. You're excited. You might even tell somebody about it. The second 24 hours, the heat starts to cool, and your mind, which hates risk more than it loves growth, starts quietly building a case against it. It's not the right time. You should research it more first. You're busy this week. By the 3rd day, the case is built, and if you haven't taken action, your mind closes the file and stamps it someday. And someday, as I have said for 40 years and will say until the day I die, is not a day of the week. 72 hours is roughly the outer edge of how long a new commitment can survive in a human mind before it either gets planted or gets buried. That's not motivation talk. That's just how we are built. The people who become wealthy, who build real things, are not people who feel more inspired than everybody else. They simply refuse to let the 72-hour window close on them. They move, often badly, often with a step that looks small and even a little silly, before the window shuts. The dreamers feel every bit as much inspiration. They simply let the clock run out, one time after another, for years, until always wanted to becomes the entire autobiography of their unlived life. Now let me tell you about a man who taught me this the hard way, though I've changed his name and a few details, because the lesson matters more than the man. I'll call him Ray Delgado. Ray managed the parts counter at an auto supply store for 11 years. Solid guy, sharp mind, Married to a woman named Carla who I always thought was smarter than half the executives I've consulted for. Ray had one idea he'd been carrying since he was maybe 24 years old. He wanted to build a small business reselling restored industrial equipment, forklifts, generators, that kind of thing, to smaller shops that couldn't afford new. He understood the machines. He understood the market. He'd tell you the whole business plan over a beer, margins, and everything, and it made sense every single time. I met Ray at a seminar I gave in his town, and afterward he came up and told me his idea with real fire in his eyes. I asked him one question. I said, "Ray, when's the last time you actually looked at a piece of equipment to buy?" He got quiet. He said, "Well, I've been meaning to." I said, "Ray, how long have you been meaning to?" He did the math out loud and the number that came out of his mouth was 9 years. 9 years of meaning to. 9 years of a genuinely good idea sitting in the always wanted to file, getting polished up and told at parties, never once getting a physical action taken against it. I told Ray about the 72-hour rule right there in the hallway of that conference center. I said, "Ray, I'm not asking you to quit your job. I'm not asking you to take out a loan tomorrow. I'm asking you, in the next 3 days, to do one real thing that a person who is actually building this business would do. Look at one machine. Call one supplier. Write down one number. Anything. But something a dreamer wouldn't bother doing, because it costs a little bit of dignity to try and possibly fail." Ray went home. And I'll tell you honestly, I didn't hear from him for almost 2 years, and I figured, like I figure with most people I meet at these events, that the seminar high wore off in the parking lot and Ray went back to meaning to. I was wrong about Ray. What actually happened, he told me later, is that he drove out on the third day, a Saturday, to look at a used forklift a farm equipment dealer had listed for parts. Didn't buy it. Didn't have the money lined up. Just went and looked at it, ran his hands over it, asked the dealer a dozen questions, and drove home. That was it. That was the entire first action. But here's what Ray said changed after that one Saturday. The idea stopped being a someday idea and became an in-progress idea in his own head, and once it lived there, his mind started treating it completely differently. He started noticing listings he'd been scrolling past for years. He started doing the math on weekends instead of just at parties. 11 months after that first Saturday, Ray bought his first piece of equipment, restored it in his garage over 6 weekends, and sold it for a profit that was, in his words, embarrassingly small but real. 4 years after that Saturday, Ray Delgado left the parts counter for good. Today he runs a yard with 4 employees and moves more used industrial equipment in a month than most dealers in his state move in a quarter. And I asked him once, "Ray, what actually changed? You had the same knowledge at 24 that you had at 35. He said, "Jim, I didn't get smarter. I just stopped letting the window close. That one Saturday, looking at a forklift I didn't even buy, is the only difference between the guy who talks about the business and the guy who owns it." I want you to sit with what Ray said, because it's the whole lesson. He didn't get smarter. The knowledge was identical. The only thing that changed is that one time, out of probably 15 or 20 times over those 11 years that the same idea had resurfaced in his mind, he respected the 72-hour window instead of letting it close. One time. That's the margin. It is almost never a difference in the size of the idea or the quality of the person. It is a difference in whether, in that narrow 3-day window while the idea is still warm, a person is willing to take one small, unglamorous, often unimpressive action before their own mind quietly files it away as something they've always wanted to do. So let's talk about what this means for you, starting tonight, because understanding a rule and living by a rule are two very different things. First, you have to catch the idea the moment it shows up, because you can't respect a 72-hour window on an idea you've stopped noticing. When something crosses your mind that makes your chest tighten, a business, a book, a conversation you need to have, a habit you need to break, write it down that same day, with the date next to it. That date is the start of your clock. Second, decide immediately what the smallest real action looks like. Not the biggest action. The smallest one that still counts as physical movement in the real world. Not I'll think about a business plan. A phone call. A visit. A single email sent to a single real person. The dreamer's trap is believing the first step has to be impressive. It doesn't. Ray's first step was looking at a forklift he didn't buy. Third, put that action on the calendar within the 72 hours, not as a hope, but as an appointment with the same weight as a meeting with your boss. And fourth, and this is the one almost everybody skips, when you take that small action, mark it. Tell one person, write it in a journal, do something that makes it real and countable, because the whole danger of the 72-hour window is that a vague idea can quietly slide back into vagueness even after a small step, if you don't anchor it as something that actually happened. Here's something else I want you to notice, the same way I told that room to notice something about the folks getting up early. Nobody around you is tracking your 72-hour windows. Your coworkers, your family, the people at church, they have no idea how many good ideas cross your mind in a given month, and they will never know how many of them you let die quietly and how many you acted on inside 3 days. This is invisible work. It doesn't show up on a resume. It doesn't show up in a conversation at the dinner table. What shows up, years later, is the result, the business that exists, the book that got published, the body that got transformed, the marriage that got repaired, and by then, nobody can see the 72-hour windows that built it. They'll look at the finished thing and assume you got lucky, or you had connections, or you were simply born with more drive than they were. They will believe almost anything before they'll believe the actual answer, which is that you respected 3-day windows that they let close, over and over, for years, until the compounding difference became too large to explain any other way. And understand something about the math of this, because it compounds exactly the way money does. If you respect even one 72-hour window a month, just one good idea, acted on within 3 days, every single month, that's 12 real actions a year. Most of those actions won't lead anywhere by themselves. That's fine. That was never the point. The point is that a small percentage of those 12 compound into something real, and over 10 years, 12 windows a year respected instead of ignored is 120 real, physical first steps that a dreamer never took. You don't need all 120 to turn into something. History and every wealthy person I have ever personally studied tells me you need maybe 3 or 4 of them to turn into something, and that's enough to change the entire shape of a life. The dreamer isn't missing the 3 or 4 good ideas. The dreamer had them. The dreamer is missing the habit of moving on any of them inside the window before the mind quietly closes the file. So here is what I want you to do, starting the moment this ends. Think back right now, tonight, to the last real idea that crossed your mind, the one that made your chest tighten a little, the one you've maybe already started explaining away. I want you to write it down before you go to sleep, with today's date next to it. Tomorrow morning, before you check your phone, before the excuses have time to organize themselves, I want you to decide on the smallest real action a person actually building this thing would take, and I want you to put it on your calendar for some point in the next 72 hours, not as a hope, but as an appointment you intend to keep. Then keep it. It doesn't have to be impressive. Ray didn't buy the forklift. He just went and looked at it. That's enough. That's always been enough. The window isn't asking for your whole life in 72 hours. It's asking for one honest, physical piece of proof that this idea is going to live somewhere other than in your head. One more thing before I let you go, because I don't want you walking out of here with the wrong picture of what this looks like in practice. The 72-hour rule is not about speed for its own sake, and it's not about recklessness. I am not telling you to quit a stable job on a Tuesday because an idea hit you on a Sunday. Ray didn't quit his job at the parts counter for 4 more years. What I'm telling you is that the commitment itself, the decision, the first honest action, cannot wait, even if the full execution takes a decade. Those are 2 different clocks, and dreamers confuse them constantly. They think because the whole project will take years, there's no rush on the first step, so they let the first step slide for weeks, then months, then years, until the whole thing quietly dies. Builders understand instinctively that the first step and the finished result live on completely different timelines. The finished result might be 5 years out. The first step is due in 72 hours, no matter what. Keep those 2 clocks separate in your own mind and you'll never confuse patience with procrastination again, because that confusion, more than anything else, is what kills good ideas before they ever get a chance to prove themselves. I'll tell you something else Ray said to me, years after that Saturday with the forklift, that I still think about. He said the hardest part was never the big decisions, buying his first real inventory, hiring his first employee, signing his first lease. Those decisions, when they finally came, felt almost easy, because by then the business already existed in some small, undeniable form. The hard part, he said, was always that very first action, the one nobody would even notice, the one that felt almost too small to matter. That's the one your mind fights you on the hardest, because it's the one that turns a comfortable idea into an uncomfortable commitment. Once you're past it, everything downstream gets easier, not harder, because you're no longer choosing between dreaming and building. You've already chosen. You're just building now. Most of you are not going to do this. I've been at this a long time, and I know that. Most of you will leave here tonight, feel something for about an hour, and by Thursday the idea that crossed your mind today will have quietly slid into the always wanted to file with all the others. That's your choice to make, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. But some of you are going to hear this and something is going to click, and you're going to write that idea down tonight, and tomorrow, inside 72 hours, you're going to take the smallest real step a builder would take instead of the comfortable step a dreamer takes. And I promise you this, not the vague kind of promise, the kind I've watched prove true in person after person for 40 years. If you respect that window even a handful of times a year, in 3 years you will be standing in a completely different life, and the people around you will call it luck because they can't see the windows. You'll know better. That's the whole rule. Catch the idea. Respect the 72 hours. Take the small, unglamorous, real step before your own mind files it away as something you always wanted to do. Do that consistently, and in a few years you'll have built something the dreamers around you are still just talking about at parties. If this hit home tonight, tell me in the comments what idea has been sitting in your always wanted to file the longest. I read every one of them. And if you want more of this kind of straight talk on the mindset that actually separates the people who build from the people who just dream, subscribe to Legacy Mindset, because this is exactly the kind of thing we live in every single week. Now go write that idea down.